One ESPN expert predicts a new head coach for the Seahawks, and his name is not Dan Quinn. So here's who he chose. ESPN's Dan Graziano predicted the landing spots for a few top head coaching candidates. So after we talk about who he picked for Seattle, I've got a couple others in case you're interested. He did not have them hiring Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, who has been a favorite from most experts. Instead, some of you are going to like this. He's got them going with recently fired Titans head coach Mike Vrabel. So I figured, let's talk.
Mike Lefko just crashed his car.
Truly. Lost his mind. I mean, I just saw him in the kitchenette, so maybe he crashed into a wall walking back.
Dropped his coffee cup.
He just, what? It's so funny because the only Titans fan I know, and potentially the only one that exists, Mike Lefko, does not like the idea of Mike Vrabel being here in Seattle, but everyone else I know loves it. I mean, Mike Salk likes the idea. Plenty of fans have always texted in Mike Vrabel. I'm always curious to hear why. Maybe it's because of what Mike Vrabel did, kind of overachieving with what he had in Tennessee. I don't know. But, Bump, let's talk about the fit of Mike Vrabel as Seahawks head coach. Where do you want to start?
I'll just start. How about that?
Okay.
I ain't mad at that. And if he were to be here, I think it's a good move. You know, I picked the three that I would want to see, but that doesn't mean I look at Vrabel and be like, oh, what are we doing there? But let's talk about who he is and if he's a good fit. 2 losing seasons out of 6 in Tennessee. He's 2-3 in the playoffs. He's had a top scoring offense twice in 2019 and 20. Top 10 rushing offense 4 times, 18, 19, 20, and 21. We all know who's the catalyst in that whole thing. He's had 3 different offensive coordinators too: Arthur Smith, Matt LaFleur, and Downing. Downing is with the Jets now, pass game coordinator. We know where LaFleur is at, and then Smith is unemployed. He's had a top 10 defense once. In 2018, they were 8th. Top 10 rushing defense against the run 2 times. In 2021, they were 2nd. In 2022, they were 1st. This past year, they were 13th. He's had 2 different coordinators over there. Right now, he has Shane Bowen, who is 37 years old. I see that name as your DC, and I wonder if he were to come over here, do you bring Shane with you, a young guy? Of course, I don't, no ageism here, but I think some youth pumped into the coaching staff would be great. So I look at him on paper and I go, all right, well, the defense has been a big concern. He hasn't had great defenses, but he's had good defenses in a couple of categories, right? But it's more about what he brings to this team as a person. And everything I hear about Vrabel is that no nonsense. He does have a good relationship with his players. You see the way Will Levis embraced him after scoring the game-winning touchdown and getting all hyped, and Mike sharing that moment with him. He's not a cold personality like a Bill Belichick seems, at least on the sideline. I think it'll be a good fit. I think there are several guys that'll be a good fit here. There's not just one guy, and you look at him and you go, you have to get that guy. If you don't get him, you are done. No, I don't agree with that. So, no, I like it. If he were to be here, I think he brings a different dynamic to this. I think how do you keep some of Pete Carroll, right? How do you keep these guys coming to work and wanting to be here and being enthusiastic? I'm not sure. Maybe he brings that himself because I don't know anyone in that organization. I don't know anyone who has played for him. So we just have to assume that things will be all right. But Vrabel's good, man. He's been around the block. He started in Houston, a defensive line coach or linebacker coach, then defensive coordinator, makes his move to Tennessee, has some good years, been to a conference championship, did a lot with Tannehill, got Tannehill paid. D. Henry's on the down end. So what he can do with a run game, I like it. I appreciate it. And what he can do with the defense is good enough to me. The guy's experienced, and I like his attitude.
Let's talk about what he can do with culture. Albert Breer compared Vrabel to 2 head coaches who've gotten a lot of love this year.
I'd say Vrabel, if you want to look at, what D'Amico has done in Houston, what Vrabel himself did over his first couple of years in Tennessee, and then what Dan Campbell has done in Detroit, that's sort of be what you were about.
I've seen so many listeners, as of you, Bump, text in, okay, where's Seattle's version of Dan Campbell? And maybe it's going from a player's coach and not wanting to completely abandon that idea. So you're looking for another player's coach, but looking for a guy where it's like, okay, even through losses, it sure seems like this guy's players want to run through a wall for him. And maybe that is Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, it does. And body language is big, right? And some guys just don't express it. I always use Bill Belichick because he's a stone cold killer, you know what I'm saying? And I look at Vrabel on the sideline, and he looks like the guys love him and will play for him. Talent is talent, And you can't out-scheme talent. Sometimes you can, but eventually in football, the team with the better players are going to win if you put them in the right position. So I look at his last 2 years, and I don't throw him away, but I also say, all right, man, you didn't have a good last couple of years, but you did a couple things well. How much of that would you bring over here to the Seahawks? And to me, it starts on defense. I've been saying it since day one. I think you need a defensive guy. That's exactly who he is. And he wouldn't necessarily be the defensive coordinator either. And I like that. And the reason why I like that is because you can have an emphasis as a head coach, but I always like when the head coach is able to go over there and check up on the offense, go over there and check up on the defense, go to the special teams and make sure things are in order. And you hire the right people under you, guys who believe in the things that you believe in. And it looks like in this guy, Shane Bowen, he does exactly that. He's been there for 4 years with Vrabel. Vrabel likes him. So would he bring him over or not? So he doesn't have to be the coordinator, but I like the defensive-minded side of this thing.
I do too, and I do like the idea of a couple things. Sticking with the players coach, sticking with someone who can get a lot out of a little, even though I think the Seahawks have more to work with than do the Titans. And like you said, going with someone who's a defensive mind. I mean, that's been your biggest issue since, 2015?
Yeah.
Like, it's been a long time since you've been really competitive on the defensive side of the ball. So I like all three of those things as well. I do wonder whether someone like Vrabel will come here as a former head coach just recently. Not like a Dan Quinn where it's like, yeah, he's been a head coach, but, he kind of got humbled and then, went back to being a defensive coordinator. Maybe he takes over for McCarthy in Dallas. Who knows what's going to happen there. But this is someone who's used to a lot of power. This isn't someone who's going to come here and kind of be like, wow, my first chance. I really got to prove myself.
Right.
This is like, what's that relationship going to look like with a general manager that's just now taking over with full authority over the coaching staff for the first time?
Well, I think that might be an advantage, right? Because John gets to pick his guy. He wasn't chosen. All right, he gets to choose now. He gets to say, all right, this is the guy that I want. And when you're hired by somebody, there has to be some type of appreciation as well, right? Like, okay, you're giving me another chance. Obviously, they're vibing. They've sat down. They've had dinner, cigars, beer, whatever they do when they're courting each other, right? And if John sits down with Mike and says, all right, I like this, then I think they're automatically connected. This is John's very first hire as a GM. He's been in the game 14 years, right? This will be his first hire at that head coach spot. So he has to go with someone who he thinks he can vibe with. Here's the thing, too. John Schneider is part of Pete Carroll's culture, right? John Schneider walking around the locker room, being on the sidelines, going to practice. He kind of grew up in this thing with Pete Carroll. So him just being here alone, I think he gets great perspective because he will be able to sniff out if this guy will continue to do some of the things that Pete Carroll did, and will he eliminate some of the things that he didn't like about Pete. So I think John is the perfect candidate to go out there and find a coach who's still going to bring some Pete Carroll to the system.
One last thing from the Mac and Jacks text line on Vrabel before I get to these other coaches. From the 206, why did he get let go of in Tennessee? It was sus, wasn't it? And I want to add to the 206, we aren't talking about this up-and-coming offensive coordinator or this really promising defensive coordinator. We're talking about a coach who was just fired.
Right.
So you have to talk about what you're risking in hiring him. I mean, what you risk in hiring someone who hasn't been a head coach is they aren't going to be a good head coach.
Right.
What you risk in hiring someone who was just fired is that whatever reason that got them fired in their last gig is going to rear its head again in Seattle.
Right. Well, think about what's going on over there in Tennessee. New general manager. I believe this was his second year over there being the GM. You have a quarterback who's getting old and he's phasing out. You drafted 2 quarterbacks in the last 2 drafts. Derrick Henry's getting old. You bring over D-Hop to try to save the passing game. There's change happening over there, right? Vrabel's been over there 6 seasons. And maybe they look at this and say, we want to go a different direction than the philosophy that Vrabel has. Doesn't mean he's not a good coach. It means that, look, you're not going to have D. Henry anymore. We got young quarterbacks. Maybe you want a younger offensive-minded guy over there. D-Hop isn't going to be there anymore. You're bringing Traylon Burks. You draft him from Arkansas and hoping that he's going to be the next A.J. Brown. That doesn't work out. You send A.J. Brown to Philly. There's been so many changes the last 3 years for the Titans that they're just like, all right, let's just start off fresh. Nothing against you, Mike. I think you're a good coach, but we see just the philosophy going a different direction here.